A lot of people ask me why Korea? Why, of all places in the world, why did I choose Korea? And so I decided I wanted to sit down and tell you, I guess you could say, my Korea story. Make sure you sit back and you relax because this is gonna be a long one. And yes, there are dark and maybe sad parts to this story, but I really do hope you can stick through till the end because there is so much hope and joy that I experience now. And if all of the bad didn't happen, I wouldn't be where I am today. So let's get right into it. I was actually living in China and I had my dream job in China. I truly thought this job is going to be my life job. I'm just always going to live overseas. I'm gonna work, abroad. I'm gonna love on people abroad. I'm gonna share truth abroad. Like, this is what I thought my dream job was. In China is actually when I found out about South Korea for the first time. There was this beautiful cafe near my house. They very much took like South Korean like cafe hopping culture and they brought it to their cafe because this cafe was stunning and delicious. And when I found out they were like Koreans, I was like, oh, where's Korea? Like I had heard of South Korea, but I had no idea where South Korea was. So I find out that my friend's really into BTS. So she starts educating me and my other roommate on like K-pop. And I was really loving the way that Korean sounded. I thought it sounded so beautiful. And I was like, man, I wonder if I can learn like a little bit of Korean. I could maybe go to this cafe that I literally go to every day and I can speak just a little bit of Korean with them to maybe like help those Korean cafe owners feel a little bit more like at home. And so I just walked in one day, 안녕하세요, and they just like, wow, they like freaked out, but they were just so happy, like to see their face, because there was no masks at the time because Rona hadn't hit yet, to see their face just like light up with joy was so, it was so worth it. And I was trying so hard to learn Korean, but I was also in Chinese classes and Chinese is so dang difficult. So I had my little notebook, I would go to the cafe, I had Chinese on one side, Korean on one side. Well, you see, I planned to go to Korea in January of 2020. I had my ticket and everything. Then all of a sudden, I am not living in China. I unexpectedly found myself on a forced plane ride back to my home country, and this picture is me sitting in the Seoul airport because I just so happened to have my layover to America in South Korea. I was basically sent home. Like, I didn't have a choice, but I had to leave this job. And honestly, this part of the story wasn't that difficult. When things are out of your hands, you just kind of follow through. I think that in most traumatic experiences, it's later when the pain and the trauma of what had happened hit. And I don't want to spend too much of this video talking about this traumatic experience, but let's just say my whole life, and I think you might be able to agree with me, my whole life I just wanted to feel like my presence mattered, to somebody. I wanted to be known. I wanted to be known for who I was now, not who I was in my past. And so I think from this state of wanting to matter, I was way more vulnerable, thinking that maybe opening up my vulnerability to others would lead to them knowing me more, which would lead to more intimate relationships with people. And what ended up happening was the more I opened up, the more I was maybe misunderstood or misjudged. But also, I would say that I did have a tendency to maybe be verbally dramatic with people who I am really close with. So if I felt really close to someone, I would even less sugarcoat it. Like, I was already blunt, but with people who I knew me, I was even more blunt, or maybe even far past blunt. Like, I would emotionally exaggerate what I was saying. And I really think this was like a attention-seeking thing, and everything collapsed within 48 hours. So I literally had nowhere to go but my parents' house. And I pull up to my parents' house. I don't have a friend within a few states of me. For some reason, Korean was something that still I had interest in, and I really don't even know why. At that time, I started watching these videos about GOT7, and they're the only group that I maybe know anything about. I know their names. I know they're not together anymore. I don't know much other than that, but I watched these videos because these guys were just so funny. I loved their sense of humor. And when you are so deep in sadness, anything that is enjoyable or just like maybe helps you escape your current reality, like I was binge watching all of it. And I started watching K-dramas, and I literally would shut out the world around me because I didn't want to be in it. I would shut out the world. I wanted to numb the world because I had felt so forgotten. And I also forgot in myself what my purpose was in the world. Like, why? Why would I be here? Why would I go through just, like, what is the point of the sadness? What is the point of just continuing when you feel so dark? So I tried to think back to things that I used to love to do. I love this Korean language. I love watching these videos that bring me some joy. I wonder if I could learn Korean just because like everyone says there's one language that is their love language. And for me, it is Korean. When I hear people speak Korean, it is just, wow, it's so beautiful. I just love the way it sounds. And I started taking acting classes because I went to school for theater. I grew up on the stage. I loved acting. So I was like, I'm in Atlanta. Atlanta has become like the #1 film producing city in America. It now beats Los Angeles. So I was like, I'm here. I might as well, go for it. This could be another distraction, from reality. One of my first acting classes, we are supposed to pick partners. I didn't really know anybody in the class. And I randomly got assigned the one Korean guy. And of all the activities that we could do, of all the activities you could do in an acting class, he decided to have us do this exercise where we would tell stories to our partner, and the partner had to guess whether or not the story was true or false. And so we, as actresses and actors, have to fake the story, or we have to tell like a completely honest story. And so my partner started telling me stories about living in Korea. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, because I was just thinking about how I wanted to learn Korean. So I get the guts to just ask him, hey, a weird question, but do you happen to know anybody that teaches Korean or a tutor or something like that? Because I'm kind of interested in learning Korean. No joke. He's like, oh, my sister literally teaches Korean. She teaches classes here in Atlanta. They're once a week. So guess who signs up for classes, starts taking these classes? And that's actually when the pandemic hit, by the way. So I took online classes during the pandemic. In my Korean class, I started making friends. So they started introducing me to more like Korean culture because I literally knew nothing. I went to Korean barbecue for the first time with a dear friend of mine. If you guys are ever in Duluth, please check out this barbecue place. It is my favorite because the owner, Cha, she is just the sweetest thing ever. She taught me how to like wrap my first sam, and sam is like when you take lettuce and you put the meat and then you put all the goods, you fold it up and you put the whole thing in your mouth. You're not supposed to bite into it. Like you're supposed to literally put the whole thing in your mouth. Here I had this random stranger shoving sam wraps into she was feeding me. I was like, I don't know what's happening, but everything tastes immaculate. Like I'm on cloud 12. And then I also made a really good friend of mine named Reese through this class. Her and I hang out, and literally like from the moment we met each other, we just bonded right away. And then I was like, okay, I want to move out of my parents' house. Pandemic is starting to, slow down. I want to move out of my parents' house. I need to get a job. At the time, my friend, she's single, but she has a spare bedroom in her house. So I started renting out that room. And then I literally type jobs near me, server, because I wanted to work as a server, because I wanted to make as much money as soon as possible. And I didn't know if I was going to stay in Atlanta or not. Closest serving job near me, it is a Korean barbecue. Y'all, like, I'm not kidding. Korea just kept coming up into my life. And as I work at this Korean barbecue, I obviously make a lot of Korean friends. And it's like, again, I wasn't choosing this. It was just randomly here, connection made. And I keep thinking in the back of my head, man, I almost went to Korea. How amazing would it have been if I actually went to Korea and then came back and was able to like maybe enjoy all of this Korean life stuff with the perspective of living in Korea and seeing it like firsthand. I literally just decided, you know what? I'm gonna go. I've saved up enough money. I work really hard to be able to save to travel. I've traveled to many countries. I've now been to like over 10 countries. All I've done my whole life was just go. I just went for it. I was like, why should that stop now? I don't have any ties. Let's go. And so I told my friend Reese, who was in my Korean class, I think I'm just gonna go. Like, I'm just going. But I wasn't totally sure, but I wanted to. And she really wanted to come with me, but sadly finances just weren't really working out. So I was thinking, okay, I guess I have to go by myself. Literally the next day, like she shows up at my house and is like, oh, so I randomly got this huge refund from my school. And I suddenly have a few like extra $1,000, and like I may or may not have already put in my 2 weeks in at work, and like we're buying our tickets now. And I was just like, Okay, rewind. One more time. One more time. But I kid you not, we bought our tickets, and I think it was like a week or two. I want to say it was 2 weeks later. We were in Korea, March 2021. We out here. We made it. I literally couldn't believe it was happening. But let's talk about how insanely terrified I was. Put the pandemic aside. Once you get to a country, you know, you're just so excited to be there. So you just go out and you see the world and you're like, oh my gosh, I did the thing. Throw a little bit of 2-week quarantine in there. And now you have 2 weeks to marinate on the fact that you literally quit your job and you just up and moved to Korea, and you don't speak Korean. Like, you've been taking classes, but you can't have no conversation. You have 2 weeks just sitting in this room like, what the heck did I just do? And by the time it was actually time to be released into South Korea, it's time to exit the quarantine facility, I wasn't exactly in a stable like place in life. This just enhanced the instability that was all up inside me. Thank goodness for the wonderful Korean individuals who have literally like held me under their arm and taken me throughout the streets of Korea and just shown me around, because it's what led me to like be able to make videos for you guys. That's my like how I got to Korea the first time, but there's way more to why I came back and why this trip means a million times more than any of those other trips ever did.